My name is Kelvik, Junior Combat Analyst. Third rotation. And yes, before you ask, I got stuck with documentation duty. Because apparently someone needs to record these training sessions for posterity. Or lawsuit purpose. Honestly, it is hard to tell the difference sometimes. Argentus 7, if you have never had the misfortune of being stationed here, is where the Alliance sends its best and brightest to get their egos systematically demolished by instructors who make drill sergeants look like childcare providers. The station floats in a nothing sector of space, deliberately isolated, because when you are training soldiers who can level city blocks, you want some distance from actual cities. The humans shuffled in during morning rotation, and I mean shuffled. No dramatic entrance, no confident stride, just this short, compact woman in a standard-issue jumpsuit that looked 2 sizes too big. Her skin was this medium brown tone that seemed to shift in the station lights, and her hair was pulled back in what I would later learn humans call a bun, practical and utterly unremarkable. I was cataloging her physique for the official records. Height, roughly 1.6 meters. Mass maybe 60 kilograms if you counted the boots. Muscle definition, present but not intimidating. She looked like she would snap if one of the Corthian heavy worlders sneezed in her direction. The other cadets, and there were maybe 40 of us scattered around the staging area, barely gave her a second glance. We had 3 Corthians, their gray hide glinting under the harsh white lights, 5 Centauri, all elegant limbs and crystalline bone structure, a couple of Vexian twins who never stopped clicking at each other in their language, and me, a Peltharian, which basically means I look like someone stretched a salamander to 2 meters tall and gave it opposable thumbs. Humans were not rare in the Alliance, not anymore, but they were not exactly winning medals in the combat divisions either. They were administrators, engineers, diplomats, the folks who kept the paperwork flowing and the supply chains functional. Useful, sure, but nobody was writing songs about human warriors. Then Weapons Master Drexel entered and the entire room snapped to attention. Drexel was Corthian, which meant he was already built like someone had carved a tank out of muscle and bad attitude. 2.4 meters of walking nightmare, with ceremonial scarring across his gray hide that marked every major victory in his 40-year career. His armor, and listen closely because this becomes important later, was combat-grade Durasteel composite, rated to deflect plasma bolts and kinetic rounds up to 50 millimeters. He swept his gaze across us, those small yellow eyes missing nothing. And when they landed on Tara's, his mouth split into something that might have been a smile if smiles carried that much contempt. Oh, this was going to be entertaining. Drexel had a reputation that preceded him like a shockwave. 83 consecutive training cycles without a single cadet landing a meaningful strike. Not a scratch, not a dent, not even a scuff mark on that precious armor of his. He had broken bones, shattered confidence, and sent more than a few promising careers spiraling into desk jobs. The Alliance kept him around because, well, if you could survive Drexel, you could probably survive actual combat. He circled Torres like a predator evaluating prey, his footsteps heavy enough to vibrate through the deck plating. A human, he said, and the way he pronounced it made it sound like a diagnosis. With a blade. Torres had been assigned her equipment moments before, and yeah, it was a blade. Singular. One single, pathetically thin piece of folded steel that humans apparently called a katana. No plasma edge, no molecular disruption field, no gravitic stabilizers. Just metal that had been heated and hammered by someone who clearly had never heard of modern technology. Yes, sir, Torres replied, her voice level, almost bored. Do you know what I do to cadets who bring inadequate equipment to my training ground? Drexel leaned down, putting his face close to hers. The size difference was almost comical. I assume you educate them, sir? Someone in the back, probably one of the Centauri, made a choking sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Drexel's expression darkened, which on a Corthian face looks like watching a thunderstorm develop in real time. Educate, he repeated slowly. Yes, I educate. He straightened up, addressing the entire room now. This human thinks a primitive slashing weapon will suffice in modern combat. She thinks centuries-old technology can stand against Alliance standard armaments. Tori said nothing, just stood there with her hand resting on the sheathed blade, her expression as readable as a blank wall. That silence, I think, is what pushed Drexel over the edge. He wanted fear, or anger, or desperate justification. Instead, he got the emotional equivalent of elevator music. Fine, Drexel announced, his voice booming across the staging area. Formal challenge. Full contact sparring. Torres versus myself. Right now, the room erupted in murmurs. Formal challenges were rare, usually reserved for cadets who got too confident, and they always ended badly for the challenger. Torres tilted her head slightly, considered for exactly 2 seconds, then nodded. Accepted. I pulled out my datapad, because documentation, remember? But I also opened the secondary screen, the one connected to the cadet betting pool. The odds were already populating. Drexel to win in under 30 seconds, 4-1. Drexel to win without taking a single hit, 2-1. Torres to land any strike at all, 50-1. I put 5 credits on Torres lasting a full minute. Not because I believed it, but because someone had to be optimistic, and the payout would be magnificent. Drexel was already walking toward the arena platform, his armor segments shifting and locking into combat configuration with mechanical precision. This was going to be a massacre. Drexel's armor was not just protection, it was a statement. Durasteel composite plating reinforced at every joint with interlocking segments that allowed full mobility while maintaining structural integrity. The chest piece alone could withstand a direct hit from a military-grade plasma rifle. I had seen the test footage. Shoulder pauldrons embedded with kinetic dispersal nodes, gauntlets that could crush titanium, and boots weighted for stability that still somehow did not slow him down. His weapons loadout was equally impressive. A training staff, 2 meters of solid carbonized steel with weighted ends, capable of delivering strikes that would pulverize bone. It was set to half power for training purposes, which meant it would only break ribs instead of liquefying organs. How thoughtful. Then there was Torres. She had removed her jumpsuit jacket, standing now in just a thin black shirt and standard-issue pants. The blade, that ridiculous katana, was maybe a meter long, curved slightly, with a handle wrapped in some kind of fabric cord. I pulled up the equipment specs on my datapad, hoping for something that would justify this insanity. Weapon designation: traditional human katana. Material composition: folded steel. Folded steel. Like we were living in the pre-space age. Weight: roughly 1 kilogram. Edge thickness: approximately 0.5 millimeter. No power source, no enhancement modules, no tactical uplinks. It was a museum piece being brought to a gunfight. My secondary brain, the part of Peltharian anatomy that handles threat assessment, was screaming that this was going to end with medical intervention. Humans were fragile compared to most Alliance species. Their bones broke easier, their organs were poorly protected, and their pain tolerance, while admirable, had limits. The arena platform activated, projecting a 10-meter by 10-meter combat zone outlined in hard light barriers. Not to keep combatants in, those were just visual markers, but to keep spectators at a safe distance. The rules populated on the overhead display: first to yield, first to incapacitation, or first blood. No lethal strikes, though with the size difference I was not sure how Drexel could avoid them. Combat duration: maximum 5 minutes. Drexel stepped into the arena, rolling his shoulders, his armor plates clicking and settling. He looked like a walking fortress. Torres stepped in opposite him, blade still sheathed, and performed a simple bow. Just a slight bend at the waist, formal, control. I checked the betting pool again. Someone had just put 100 credits on Torres not surviving without major injury. The odds on her actually winning had climbed to 300-1. I should have bet more. The opening buzzer sounded, a sharp electronic chirp that barely had time to fade before Drexel launched forward like a missile with anger management issues. His staff came down in an overhead strike that would have caved in a skull, the air actually whistling around it. Torres moved not backward like I expected, but sideways, the staff crashing into the platform deck where she had been standing a fraction of a second earlier. The impact left a visible dent in the reinforced flooring. "Stand still," Drexel growled, already pivoting for a horizontal sweep. Torres did not stand still. She dropped low, the staff passing maybe a centimeter above her head, close enough that it disturbed her hair. Then she was moving again, circling, her blade still sheathed. The crowd was getting into it now. One of the Korthian cadets bellowed encouragement to Drexel. The Zentari were clicking their approval, their crystalline fingers tapping rhythms of anticipated victory. Drexel pressed the attack, and this is where his decades of experience showed. He was not just swinging wildly, each strike flowed into the next, creating a pattern of overlapping threat zones that should have been impossible to evade. High strike, low strike, thrust, sweep, every angle covered, every escape route closed off. Except Torres kept finding routes that should not have existed. She was retreating, yes, moving backward around the arena perimeter, but calling it retreat felt wrong. It was too controlled, too precise. Every step placed her exactly where the next attack would not land, with margins so thin that my threat assessment brain was having minor panic attacks trying to calculate the math. Running already? Drexel taunted, his breathing not even labored. Typical human cowardice. The betting pool was exploding with activity. Torres had lasted 45 seconds, which meant I was already in profit territory, but nobody was changing their bets on the outcome. This was just extending the inevitable. Then Torres drew her blade. The motion was so smooth, so economical that I almost missed it. One moment the katana was sheathed, the next it was in her hand, the polished steel catching the arena lights and throwing reflections across the platform. Drexel lunged, committing to a full power thrust that would have impaled her against the barrier wall. Torres moved. And here is where my entire understanding of human physiology took a hard left turn into impossible territory. She did not dodge, not really. She was not there anymore. Her body shifted maybe 10 centimeters to the side, the staff missing by a margin. I could not measure with my naked eyes, and her blade came up in a strike so fast that I only knew it happened because I saw the aftermath. A thin line appeared across Drexel's chest plate. Not a scratch, not a dent, just a line, like someone had traced it with a marker. Drexel froze, looking down at his armor. The crowd went silent. What? He said slowly, was that? Torres had already retreated 3 steps, blade held in a guard position that looked simultaneously relaxed and ready. She did not answer. I rewound the footage on my datapad, slowing it down frame by frame. At full speed, her strike had been invisible. At quarter speed, it was merely too fast to follow properly. At 1/10 speed, I finally saw it. The blade had moved in a perfectly straight horizontal line, had made contact with the armor for exactly 0.03 seconds, and had withdrawn along the same path. The precision was not mechanical. It was beyond mechanical, because machines had tolerances and margins of error. That strike had neither. I looked up from my pad, my skin rippling with involuntary color shifts that signaled confusion and Peltharian body language. Torres was smiling now, just barely, like she had remembered a private joke. Drexel charged again, and this time there was no restraint in his movements. This time he was actually trying. Drexel's second assault made his first look like a warm-up exercise. His staff became a blur of carbonized steel strikes coming from angles that should have required him to dislocate joints. Combinations that violated conventional combat geometry. He was using techniques I had only seen in archived footage from actual war zones, the kind of moves that ended careers or lives depending on the setting. Torres stopped retreating. She moved forward into the storm of strikes, and this is where every combat instructor in the galaxy would have called her suicidal. You do not advance into a Korthian weapons master's attack range. You do not close distance on someone with twice your mass and 3 times your reach. You absolutely do not do it while carrying a weapon that required you to be within arm's length to be effective. Torres did all of it. Drexel's staff came down in a diagonal slash. Torres's blade met it, not blocking, but deflecting, redirecting the momentum with a sound like a bell being struck. The staff missed her shoulder by millimeters. His follow-up thrust came immediately. Textbook perfect, aimed at her center mass. Her blade traced a circle in the air, the staff sliding along the katana's edge and passing beside her ribs. "How are you?" Drexel grunted, frustration bleeding into his voice. He did not finish the question because Torres was already counterattacking. Her blade came up in a rising strike that should have been too slow, too obvious, except it was not aimed at Drexel. It was aimed at the gap between his chest plate and his right pauldron. The katana's tip touched the exposed joint seal for maybe 1/10 of a second. Another line appeared. Drexel spun away, checking the mark. Still no penetration, still no damage. Just another thin trace across his armor surface, this one vertical where the first had been horizontal. "Stop playing," he snarled. Torres's response was to flow forward again, and now I was watching something that my brain categorized as impossible. She was not fighting Drexel, she was dancing around him, her movement so precise that she made his overwhelming offense look clumsy by comparison. Her blade struck again, this time on his left gauntlet. Another line, again, on his right thigh plate. Another line. The crowd's enthusiasm had died, replaced by confused murmuring. The Korthian cadets had stopped cheering, One of the Zentari was leaning forward, her crystalline eyes narrowed in concentration. I was recording everything, but I was also zooming in on the marks Torres was leaving. My datapad's image analysis subroutines were trying to make sense of the pattern, and that is when I saw it. The lines were not random. On Drexel's chest plate, that first horizontal strike had been joined by 2 more marks. Together they formed the top of a letter. The letter. My secondary brain, the threat assessment one, started screaming again, but for entirely different reasons. Drexel seemed to realize something was wrong, even if he had not figured out what yet. His attacks became more defensive, trying to create distance. But Torres stayed close, impossibly close, her blade finding gaps in his guard that should not have existed. A curved line appeared on his left shoulder, part of 2 diagonal strikes on his abdominal plating, the beginning of a. She is writing on him, someone whispered behind me. I think it was one of the Vexian twins. The entire crowd seemed to inhale simultaneously. Torres's blade was everywhere, moving so fast that even slowed-down footage showed only streaks of reflected light. Each strike lasted less than a heartbeat, each one placed with surgical precision on Drexel's armor, and none of them, not a single one, actually damaged anything. That was somehow worse than if she had been cutting through his defenses. She was not trying to hurt him. She was making a point. Drexel was breathing hard now, his movements becoming desperate, erratic. He was not used to being outmaneuvered. He was not used to being embarrassed. And he definitely was not used to being used as a notepad. Another strike. Another line. The letters were becoming clearer. MAYA spread across his chest and shoulders. She was signing her work. The horror on Drexel's face was matched only by the growing amazement rippling through the spectator crowd. Someone had started a new betting pool, this one focused on what the complete message would say. I did not bet. I was too busy trying to understand how a human, a species we had categorized as middle-tier combatants at best, was systematically humiliating the most decorated weapons instructor in 3 sectors. Torres stepped back for a moment, blade held loosely, and looked at Drexel like an artist evaluating a canvas. She was not even breathing hard. The timer read 3 minutes and 42 seconds when Torres made her final strike, a delicate upward flick that added the bottom curve to the letter E on Drexel's right pauldron. Then she stepped back, lowered her blade, and bowed again, that same formal gesture from the beginning. Drexel stood there, chest heaving, his staff held in a white-knuckle grip that was bending the carbonized steel. He looked down at his armor, really looked at it for the first time since the duel began. And his expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then landing solidly on rage. The marks were everywhere. Thin, precise lines that had not scratched the surface, had not even disturbed the factory coating, but were clearly visible as slight discolorations where molecular bonds had been stressed without breaking. Across his chest plate, in letters maybe 10 centimeters tall, Maya Torres. Down his right arm was here. His left shoulder had a small smiley face. I am not joking. An actual smiley face, 2 dots and a curve, etched with the same impossible precision as everything else. You, Drexel started, his voice shaking with something between humiliation and fury. You did not even try to fight. Torres sheathed her blade with a soft click. With respect, sir, I was not here to fight. I was here to prove a point. By defacing Alliance military equipment, by demonstrating that your armor is not as impenetrable as you believe, and that underestimating your opponent based on their choice of weapon is a fatal flaw in tactical assessment. She said it calmly, like she was reading from a training manual. Also, the armor is not defaced. I applied approximately 0.001 newtons of pressure per strike, just enough to stress the molecular surface without causing structural damage. It will buff out. The crowd had gone completely silent. I was frantically pulling up material science databases on my datapad, trying to verify if what she claimed was even possible. It was not. It absolutely was not possible. Durasteel composite has a very specific threshold for molecular stress. Below that threshold, nothing happens. Above it, you get deformation, fracturing, or complete failure. There is no middle ground where you can stress molecules just enough to leave visible marks without actually damaging them. The margin of error is measured in nanometers and micronewtons. Torres had hit that impossible margin dozens of times while moving at combat speed while Drexel was actively trying to kill her. The technical specifications, I muttered, still staring at my datapad. One of the Zentari cadets turned to look at me. What about them? Human muscle control, I said. My voice distant because my brain was trying to process what I was seeing. I thought it was average, maybe slightly above average, for their size class, but this is not average. This is not even in the same category as average. Torres was walking toward the arena exit, apparently done with the whole situation. Drexel just stood there, looking down at his armor, at his ruined reputation spelled out in permanent molecular stress patterns. How? He finally asked, his voice hollow. Torres paused at the barrier line, glanced back over her shoulder. Practice, sir. Lots and lots of practice. Humans have been perfecting blade work for approximately 4,000 years. We have gotten fairly good at it. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. She stepped through the barrier. Your armor held up perfectly, by the way. You should be proud of the Alliance engineering team. Drexel looked like he wanted to throw his staff through a bulkhead. Instead, he carefully set it down, turned, and walked out of the arena without another word. The betting pool resolved. Torres had won by technical superiority without causing opponent injury, a result so unusual that the system had to create a new payout category. I had earned back my 5 credits plus 200 more on the Toria's last full-minute bet. It did not feel like winning. It felt like I had just witnessed something that was going to change how the Alliance viewed human combatants, and I was not sure anyone was ready for that conversation. The Vexian twins were already arguing about the implications in rapid-fire clicks. The Corthian cadets looked like they had just watched their deity trip over its own feet. And Torres? She was heading toward the equipment return station, probably to clean her blade and file the required post-combat documentation. Like this was just another Tuesday. I spent the next 2 hours in the station's archives, pulling every available file on human physiology, combat doctrine, and historical warfare. What I found was not reassuring. Humans have approximately 640 muscles, most of them capable of independent fine motor control. Their nervous system can process proprioceptive feedback, that is awareness of body position, at rates comparable to species twice their size, but the real nightmare fuel was their training methodology. Repetition. Endless, mindless, soul-crushing repetition, where most Alliance species trained until competency, humans trained until movements became involuntary. They called it muscle memory, which is a stupid name because muscles do not have memory, but the principle was sound. Repeat a motion 10,000 times and your nervous system hardwires it, bypassing conscious thought entirely. Torres had probably practiced that same strike, that exact angle and pressure, millions of times. Not in combat, not under pressure, just standing in a room somewhere, cutting at nothing, perfecting the motion until her body could execute it without her brain's involvement. That was horrifying. The station was buzzing with activity. News of the duel had spread through every department within 20 minutes. I passed 3 separate groups of cadets arguing about human combat potential, 2 instructors reviewing Torres's files with expressions of deep concern, and 1 maintenance worker trying to explain to his supervisor why he needed specialized buffing equipment for Drexel's armor. The command staff had called an emergency meeting. I was not invited, being lowly junior analyst, but I had access to the meeting room's environmental sensors, and let me tell you, the temperature in there suggested heated debate. Drexel had not attended. He was in his quarters, door locked, status listed as unavailable. Rumor mill suggested he was either planning his resignation or planning a rematch, possibly both. I found Torres in the station commissary, eating something that looked like it had started life as vegetables before being aggressively steamed into submission. She was alone, which given the circumstances was probably intentional on everyone else's part. I sat down across from her without asking permission. Can I ask you something? She looked up, chewed, swallowed. Sure. How long have you been training with that blade? Since I was 7 years old. So, about 22 years. 22 years, she had been practicing longer than I had been alive. Why? I asked. Why dedicate that much time to something so, no offense, archaic? Torres considered the question while stabbing another piece of vegetable matter. Because my instructor told me that mastery is not about the weapon, it is about understanding yourself. The blade is just the tool that teaches you control, discipline, and precision. Those skills transfer to everything else, so you could do that with any weapon. Theoretically. Yes, practically. I would need to train with it for a few years first. She said it like a few years was nothing. Like time was just another resource to be allocated. Drexel is not going to forgive this. I warned her. I did not ask for his forgiveness. I asked for his respect. She met my eyes and there was something in her expression that made my threat assessment brain sit up and pay attention. Whether he gives it or not is his choice. What if he challenges you again? Terra smiled. Just a little. Then I will write a longer message. I submitted my official report 3 days later and it got flagged by every department head on the station. Not because I had made errors, but because the conclusions were uncomfortable. Humans are not dangerous because they are strong. Half the Alliance species can outlift them. They are not dangerous because they are fast. Plenty of species have better reflexes. They are not even dangerous because of their technology, which is adequate but not exceptional. Humans are dangerous because they are patient. They will spend decades perfecting a single skill. They will practice the same motion 1,000,000 times just to shave off a microsecond of execution time. They will take ancient, obsolete techniques and refine them to levels that border on supernatural, not through enhancement or augmentation, but through sheer, stubborn repetition. That is terrifying in ways that raw strength never could be. The training program changed after Torres's duel. Not officially, not in any documented policy update, but instructors started paying more attention to the human cadets. Started asking questions about their training backgrounds. Started, and this is the part that made me laugh, incorporating human historical combat techniques into the curriculum. Drexel eventually came out of his quarters. He did not apologize, did not acknowledge what happened, but he also stopped mocking cadets for their weapon choices. He started teaching precision over power, control over aggression. His win record dropped to 79 consecutive cycles because he was actually challenging cadets now instead of just overwhelming them. Progress, I suppose. Tars finished her rotation with top marks and transferred to a frontline posting. Last I heard, she was teaching close-quarters combat to a mixed-species unit on the outer reach. Her blade went with her, still just folded steel, still completely unmodified. The station armory added a plaque in the training hall. It read, "The blade that wrote history," which I thought was a bit dramatic, but then again I had watched it happen. As for me, I started training with a blade myself. Nothing fancy, just a standard Alliance combat knife. I had been practicing the same downward strike for 6 months now, trying to hit the same spot on a practice dummy within a millimeter margin. I am up to about 60% accuracy. Only 21.5 more years to go. Turns out underestimating humans is easy. Matching their dedication? That is the hard part. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real lesson Torres came to teach us. Not that humans could fight, but that they never, ever stop learning how.